Okay, good morning. So this is a video for the midterm, to explain the midterm. And let me make some things really clear up front. So I'm going to be providing each class with two videos. The first video is going to explain the instructions for the video. For the midterm. So that is what we're going to do today. The second video is going to explain the specific questions I'm asking you on the exam. I'm going to go over them thoroughly. I'm going to try to explain them as clearly as I can so you know exactly what I'm asking you for the exam. So again, the first video deals with instructions for the exam. And included in the instructions is essentially a grading rubric, what I'm looking for in your answers. Then the second video is going to be an analysis, an explanation of the questions themselves. Okay, let me also clarify before we get going here that this video is being made for multiple classes at different schools, right? So the Blackboard that I'm going to use is for my Lehman class, and it is a different class than my Baruch class, number one, and number two, the due date of the exam is different for Lehman versus Baruch. So for Lehman, it's due on Saturday the 20th, and for Baruch, it's due on Saturday the 27th. So keep that in mind, and if there are any differences from one class to the other, when I get to the second video where it just deals with the questions for your exam, I will have the specifics for your class, so there's no confusion. That's the biggest thing there's no confusion about this. But in general, all the formatting for the exam is identical from one school to the other, one class to the other. Okay, so let's get going here. Here is Blackboard for my Lehman class, and I have set it up virtually identically for all my classes, which is to say everything is under assignment. So what we're looking at here is the assignment folder. So we go down to the weeks. We are in week 6 right now, and here is the midterm exam. So notice that the exam in all the classes, it's going to be in a separate assignment folder, number one. Number two, on that assignment folder, it's going to say midterm exam, and it's going to give the due date. This for my Lehman class is Saturday, March the 20th by 11:59. So I'm going to click on it, and Blackboard is actually working pretty quickly here. That's lovely. And so you're going to see, right now you're going to see 3 different things there. In addition, there's going to be videos, so it's going to be 4 and ultimately 5 items. But the base 3 items are, number one, the exam, which includes the directions on a Word document, and then the questions themselves. Then what I've provided you, since the exam consists of essay questions in which I'm asking you to write essay style responses, and I'm going to clarify just in a moment exactly what I mean by essay answers. What I've given you here is rules of writing, dealing with the structure of your writing, the clarity of your writing, and so on and so forth. And what I've given you in the rules of writing, I'm not going to talk about in the video, but it's there for you to look at, are basic rules that apply to any type of writing you might do. So they are helpful, and they break writing down really into its basic component parts. Then the last thing here is the Turnitin assignment. It's also titled Midterm Exam. There's no actual content here. Rather, this is the portal by which you're going to submit your exam to me. And on my end, it should look the same as yours. I'll do this. I'll go to student mode just to have this super clear. Now, what did that do? It put me back out of the assignments for some reason. So now I'll go back. This is what you see. There's a lot of stuff I have on there that you can't see. So we go to the exam, and then what you do, let's say, you type it up, I edit it, I proofread it, my exam is done. I say, I am ready to turn that sucker in, right? So you go to View and Complete, you click on that, and it says error. Wonderful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out of my student preview. That's wonderful. Actually, it will look much like you click View and Complete. And then what you should, I don't know exactly what you see on your end, but for me, I can upload things by scrolling down the student list and uploading the exam. But you put your name, you put your midterm exam, and then you just go here and choose whether it's from your computer, Dropbox, or Google Drive, your exam, right? So first thing in terms of instructions, please just upload either a Word document or a PDF or PDF style document. Don't upload any other type of document to guarantee that the formatting is such that when you upload it, there are no problems. And once you upload it, you should be able to see that it's uploaded. If, for example, you prematurely upload something, and because once it's up there, I'm the only one who can take it down. If for any reason you upload something that you want to change and we haven't gotten to the due date yet, and you're still welcome to change it, just let me know and I can delete your attempt and you can re-upload something without any problem, but only once I clear it out. That's the key thing. Okay, so that's that. Let's click back here. And I will just open up this exam directly. Now remember, this is my Lehman class exam. And here it is. Right, so this first page for both classes is exactly identical. The format of the exams are exactly identical. So my Lehman class, first thing I give you is the due date again, March 20th. Please make sure to put your name and class time on there. You can submit it either as a Word document or a PDF. So these are things I'm expecting to be followed. They need to be followed for a lot of practical reasons. So number one, 12 font. Why and 1.5 space. Why am I asking for 12 font and 1.5 space? Because those are fairly standard formats, number one. Number two, there is a page limit. I'm going to be giving you 2 questions. Both classes are going to have 2 questions. And you have to answer each question in 1.5 pages, right? And that 1.5 page length is based on 12 font and 1.5 spacing, right? So you shouldn't be double spacing. You shouldn't be changing your margins. You shouldn't do all those things to fiddle with things, because then you're not fulfilling the 1.5 pages that I have set up here, right? Okay, so a total of 2 questions. Each answer will be a minimum of 1.5 pages for a total of 3 pages. Let's be clear. 2 questions times 1.5 pages equals 3 pages. You've got 2 questions. You must answer both of them. There are no optional questions here, right? Okay. Professor, does it have to be exactly 1.5 pages? Answer, it definitely should not be any shorter than 1.5 pages. Absolutely not. I would say a maximum of 2 pages. But part of the assignment is not just you robustly answering these questions in a way that necessitates 1.5 pages. But the other thing is saying everything you need to say in a concise and a direct way, such that you get it into the format that I'm asking. One of the great, well, I'll talk about this more in a moment, but one of the great, the 2 key elements that I'm looking for in your exam are, number one, the substance of your answer, but also the quality of the writing. And one basic challenge, what that means is, I'll make very clear. One of the great challenges of writing is saying what you need to say in the space you've been provided. Any academic writing, certainly any professional writing, for better and worse, it's just the nature of the world, almost always demands a certain limit, right? Which means you need to say what you want to say within that limit, which means you have to develop the skills and the habit of saying as much as you can with the fewest possible number of words. right? You discover, for example, that there are words you use that don't need to be there. You realize you've written a sentence that doesn't really say enough, or doesn't really say anything new compared to the last sentence you've written. So you need to say as much with each sentence, with each word, as you possibly can. In addition, for example, this 1.5 page limit means that what you have in that 1.5 pages is really as directly and as fully answering the question that's been asked of you precisely, right? What should be in that 1.5 pages is content related specifically and only to the question I've asked. There are many wonderful things you can say in response to these questions about the text you're being asked. There are many ideas you could introduce, and they all could be beautiful, they all could be accurate, they all could be super intelligent. But if you're not answering the question directly, it should not be in that 1.5 pages. Okay, so I think that's pretty clear. All right, so the grading rubric. And when I say grading rubric, I really mean two things. I mean, number one, these are the instructions. This is how you need to write your exam. And number two, this is therefore what I am looking for in your paper in terms of grading it, right? So the more of these elements that you hit, the better your grade is going to be. So the two things I'm looking for is substance and writing quality. Substance is pretty clear, which is to say I've asked you a question, and you need to answer that question as accurately and as directly as possible. As accurately and as directly as possible. There's two basic elements that are going to be involved in the substance of any answer. Number one, facts that come from the text that help to support your claim. So I say, for example, what is this? And you say, I think it is this. And you say, because this element from the text, and that fact from the text, and that fact from the text, and so on and so forth. So the bit of substance, number one, factual accuracy, and then number two, interpretation, or you could just call it reasoned conclusions from the text. So facts are things you find pretty self-evidently in the text. Interpretations are conclusions that you've reached based on the text that start to go beyond the text itself, right? I'm asking you to write in an essay format, which is to say complete sentence and paragraph form. And I'll talk more about that in just a moment. So in answering the questions in terms of substance and interpretation, you must, as part of your exam, cite from the text. And all you need to do is put a parenthetical notation, which is to say use parentheses at the end of a sentence before the period, and you just put the page number of the text. You do not need to put the author. You do not need to put the title of the work, because given that the questions only deal with one text at a time, we already know what text is being referred to. And we're not writing a research paper here. If we were writing a research paper, a more formal approach to citation would be appropriate. It's not necessary here. If you happen to say something, I just want to see the page number, so if I want to look it up myself, I know where to turn, right? But part of supporting your answer is going to be citing from the text. And there's two basic ways to cite from the text. Either there is a direct quotation verbatim, which of course is in quotation marks, and then the second is a paraphrase. And the important thing to understand is there are times where it's more appropriate to quote verbatim, and there's times where it's more appropriate to paraphrase, right? Our first rule here is efficiency. We don't need to include anything that is not necessary to answer the question as directly as possible, right? So, first of all, quoting verbatim. Verbatim means word for word, more than 2 words in a row. Once you have more than 2 words in a row, you have to put it in quotation marks, which is an acknowledgement that the speech that's being written or what's being written is not your own, but it's coming from someone else, and you're acknowledging that. A paraphrase, you just sum up what the author says in the most direct and condensed way possible. So there are different reasons why you might quote directly or paraphrase, right? A certain passage of a text might just be the foundation or the central element of your answer, and it might just be so important that given what you're doing is presenting evidence from the text, that you want to show that evidence as clearly as possible. Like if you were in a courtroom, right? You wouldn't want to say, oh yeah, the defendant said kind of, sort of, like this. If this is the central linchpin of the whole case, you would want to say, the defendant said, quote, I didn't do it, blah, 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 or I was at the movies on the night of the 5th, unquote, right? So that's one reason why you might quote. The second reason is that you have a passage that is central to the answer you're giving, but it's not clear what's being meant, but it's really important, and therefore showing the reader that passage and then explaining it. So whenever you quote directly, you need to explain. It's absolutely crucial that you explain what's being quoted and what it means to you, right? So next thing, paraphrase. First of all, paraphrase is a shorthand way of quoting. Essentially, you're still using a citation to acknowledge where it came from. You're just not putting it in quotation marks because you've already translated the language of the text into your own language, right? And for example, you could give a quotation and then paraphrase it to explain its meaning. That could be appropriate. Or if you just need to cut to the chase and you don't feel really obliged to quote from the text directly, or it could be a situation where the text does say this, but it doesn't say it explicitly. So you're paraphrasing to sum up an essential point that's coming from the text, right? Important to keep in mind is that when you quote directly, only ever quote exactly what you need to quote. If you are quoting 3 consecutive sentences or a whole paragraph, you're doing something wrong. That means that some of that should be quoted directly and some of it should be paraphrased, right? In the space of this paper or in any research paper, it is rare to see, for example, an entire paragraph, say 4 sentences in a row, quoted. That means that you have to digest it into your own understanding, right? So let me talk about the last thing. Facts from the text are pretty self-evident. Either you know the correct fact or you don't. Interpretations we've talked about a little bit at the beginning of the semester, right? So there is flexibility within the answer. These are essay questions. This is a humanities class. Things are not as cut and dry always, although they can be, as 2 + 2 = 4. So the quality of your interpretation, or even the correctness of your interpretation, has less to do with the fact of whether I fundamentally agree or disagree with what you're saying, but rather the extent to which you can support that interpretation with the facts from the text, which is to say the text itself, the words of the text, and your own interpretations of it. If you can provide a robust and convincing explanation for your interpretation, then that, for our purposes, is legitimate. Now that means there are obviously, we've talked about at the beginning of the semester, the boundaries of interpretation are limited by what you could call the 4 corners of the text. The text says X, and it only says X. It doesn't say Y. The words of the text are fixed. So if you're going to claim that this is what you think it means, you're going to have to make reference to the text to tease out why you think that interpretation is correct. Okay, so let's move on. So now we're looking at writing quality includes the following. So someone says you've got to write correctly. It's got to be quality writing. What exactly does that mean? First basic one, answers in complete sentence and paragraph form. No bullet points, no kind of phrases from notes and things of that sort. Particularly not, a lot of times I have bullet points on the PowerPoints. Those are not acceptable, right? You have to write in complete sentence paragraph form. Now I want to talk about what I mean by an essay. So in the classic high school, college essay that you learn a 3-part essay, which has an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, where essentially you restate in more concise form and you go a little further than your introduction, right? So we're not going to strictly follow that model, but there's key elements of the essay form that will hold true. In the introduction to an essay, you make a thesis statement. A thesis is a hypothesis about what you think to be the case that in the remainder of the essay, particularly the body, you support with evidence and facts, right? So we've talked about supporting your claim, right? So the point is, in an essay, you have a thesis claim, right? And when you answer these questions, essentially you're going to make a claim that then needs to be supported. So that basic structure remains the same. The second thing with any essay, and it varies from topic to topic how you do this, but every essay has a clarity of logical structure, starting from that general thesis claim and then working through the supporting evidence in a way that has a logic or a logical flow to it, right? Every sentence should lead into the next sentence. There should be a kind of logical cause and effect from one sentence to the next, right? There shouldn't be like a non sequitur. A non sequitur is a statement that doesn't fit into the logic of the situation, right? You're talking about one thing and then you randomly start introducing something else without it being prepared for in any way. That would be a non sequitur, right? So let's keep, what am I talking about here? I'll start spelling it out. It says you're writing complete essays that must be proofread. So proofreading. Yes, we proofread for spelling, grammar, right? That's like grade school stuff. I expect, with Word documents and all the fancy tools it has, it does all that for you, basically. What we're really concerned with in proofreading is, number one, the meaning and intelligibility of each sentence you write. You write it, you finish it, and first of all, the best way to proofread is out loud. And I hate to say it, but even the really best way to proofread is to take what you've done on the computer and actually print it out. There's just something about reading it printed out. I always find my mistakes better once I've printed it out, and I go, oh my God, how did I miss that on the computer? It happens all the time. So you print it out, you read it aloud, and you ask yourself, does this sentence make sense? Does this sentence answer the question that's asked of me? Does this sentence support the claim that I made in my initial response to the question, right? Other things, focus on the question and its scope. So everything you write should be geared toward the question that is asked of you. Anything that's not relevant to that question should not be in your essay, however brilliant it may be. So this is what scope is. Scope has to do with the parameters or the boundaries of what you're writing, and the questions themselves spell out what the scope or limits are. The questions spell out what should be in the essay, but also spells out, therefore, what should not be in it. Next thing, logical flow of ideas from one point to the next, one sentence to the next. So not only do you proofread, you ask yourself, does this sentence make sense? But you ask yourself, here is sentence 1 and here is sentence 2. They both make sense. But do they have a logical flow from one to the next? Does the first one anticipate the second one? And so on and so forth. Maybe what you need is to move those sentences around. Maybe you need a sentence in between them, a third sentence that provides a transition of thought from one to the other. And again, if you read this aloud, it really helps. Proofreading and editing is really the meat and potatoes of writing. Hemingway said if you've ever read Hemingway, he's one of the most precise and kind of crystalline writers in the English language. I'm not always thrilled by the subject matter of his works, but his use of the English language, his precision, his clarity, the fluidity of his sentences, it's tremendously precise. And he said the first draft of everything is shit, which means all the beauty and clarity of his sentences were not achieved the first time he spontaneously sat down and wrote those sentences, right? They look effortless, but in fact that appearance of effortlessness was the result of a lot of labor behind the scenes that you no longer see. Just like a great painting by Da Vinci. Underneath the layers of the paint that you see on the surface are many other layers that are all the working out of the problems and getting to the final product, which at the end of the painting, all you see is the final product, and you don't see all the muck that went into it. So when we first write, we write spontaneously. We write intuitively. Ideas pop into our head. Even when we're writing, we're still brainstorming, which is like throwing ideas out there of what we think is all about, right? And that process does not happen in a linear way. That process does not happen in a very organized way for most people, myself included. And it's only in the editing and proofreading phase that you start to bring order to that chaos and start to focus in on, yes, this sentence is really central to what I'm trying to say. This one's not. This one should go here. That one should go there, and so on. That is what writing really is. It's not just kind of spontaneously typing it out. Okay, so some things I've already said, but just reinforce. Length is no proof of a good answer. If you're saying a lot of things that aren't directly relevant, you're not answering the question really. You're just writing stuff. It's what I call filler, right? Saying things that are true, maybe even intelligent, but are not contributing to answering the question that's been asked of you. So scope, we've already talked about it. Stay within the parameters of the question, and this determines everything that's in the answer and also everything that's not. Stay on point, that's related. Okay, almost done here, kind of rounding third and heading home. Important. This test is testing your own knowledge and your own interpretive skills, and testing what you've wicked up from the material that's been provided you, PowerPoints, videos, the text itself, combined with class discussion. All three of those things are going to make a good test by having carefully looked at all and invested in all of those things. Okay, so the point is, this is not a research paper. This is not a research paper. Number 20 here, under no circumstances are you to use any secondary materials or sources, whether books or online, other than the ones I've provided you. So in one class, I have a couple secondary readings that deal with primary text. But in general, we're just dealing with primary texts, and you are not to use any information from online to answer these questions, because these questions deal primarily with your understanding of the text you've been given, right? I want to see your understanding. This test, apart from the writing, is to reflect your understanding and not someone else's, right? If we were writing a research paper, then that would be a different problem altogether, and it would be totally appropriate to be using secondary sources and citing them properly. So you are not to introduce any other literature outside what you've been provided, because it's about your understanding. And of course, connected with that, plagiarism. If I find any evidence of plagiarism, you automatically fail the exam. In the age of the internet, in the age of cut and paste, there is such a temptation for students to cut and paste from the internet things that look good and look smart and so on. If you do that, I'm going to see it in a second. And also the Turnitin function searches for plagiarism and comes up with like percentages of how similar tests are and so on. So it's not hard for me to spot plagiarism, because I see at the moment your style of writing changes a little bit, or you use a word that you haven't used in the rest of the exam, and so on and so forth. Okay, and then, failure to comply with the instructions will result in a reduction of your final grade. Right? So these are the things that I'm looking at, I'm looking for, and in the next video, we will go over the questions for your exam specifically, and I'll make it very clear exactly what I'm asking if the questions aren't already clear. Great. Thank you very much.